The sea was as calm as it ever gets, stretching out endlessly beneath the midday sun. But for James Riley, a 58-year-old fisherman from the quiet shores of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, this was just another typical day at sea. His weathered hands knew the rhythm of the tides, and his keen eyes were always on the lookout for anything out of place. Yet, as he drifted farther from the shoreline, a strange object caught his attention. A large floating black bag bobbing in the waves. Something about it felt wrong. His heart raced as he steered his boat toward it, sensing something was amiss. When his weathered hands grasped the bag's slick surface, he had no idea the secret it concealed would defy everything he knew. No one could have prepared him for what lay inside. What could be so important that it ended up here? Would you dare to open it? James Riley had been fishing these waters for nearly 4 decades. His routine was simple. Set out in the early hours of the morning, cast his nets, and return home by nightfall. It was a humble life, one he'd chosen long ago and had come to love for its rhythm. But the calm of the ocean had always been something he respected, perhaps even feared. The sea had a way of keeping its secrets, and James knew better than to challenge it. He worked around it, never against it. Yet today, something felt different. The black bag was not the first oddity he'd encountered. Over the years, he had stumbled upon lost nets, floating debris, and even the occasional weathered crate. But this was different. The bag had an unnatural, almost deliberate look to it. The way it floated seemed purposeful, as if it was waiting for him. As his boat drifted closer, the gentle waves lapping against the hull, James felt a knot tighten in his stomach. His gut instinct, the one honed over years of navigating unpredictable waters, was telling him something wasn't right. He slowed the engine and reached over the side of the boat, his hands gripping the edge of the bag. The water seemed colder here, despite the warm sun above. He pulled it slowly toward the boat, his breath steady but his mind racing. It was heavy, far heavier than a bag of seaweed or a lost piece of trash. As he hauled it onto the deck, he inspected it more closely. The bag was made of a material that looked almost like canvas but was much thicker, nearly rubbery. There was something oddly familiar about it, but he couldn't place it. No logos, no identifying marks, just an overwhelming feeling of unease. It felt as though it had been out there for far too long, just waiting for someone to find it. James's hands trembled as he considered opening it. For a moment, he thought about leaving it. He could toss it back into the sea, or better yet, take it to the authorities. But then his curiosity, that old fisherman's trait that had kept him alive all these years, took over. There was something in his gut that told him he needed to know what was inside. This wasn't just some misplaced cargo or a forgotten duffel bag. No, this felt important, dangerous even. His weathered fingers gripped the zipper, and with a deep breath he began to pull it open. The moment the bag parted, the smell hit him first. It wasn't the usual scent of salt water or fish, but something much more pungent, musty, almost rotting. He recoiled slightly, but the urge to know what was inside kept him from backing away. He pulled the flap open wider. Inside was a thick layer of some kind of fabric, tightly wrapped around something heavy. The fabric seemed to pulse under his fingers, like it was alive. The heat of the midday sun made the air thick and stifling around him, but it wasn't the heat that made his palms sweat. He gingerly pulled the fabric aside, revealing something metal. His heart skipped a beat as he stared at the object nestled inside. At first, he thought it was a piece of old machinery, perhaps something that had sunk from a shipwreck. But as he drew it out, he realized this was no machine. It was too sleek, too compact. It looked like a black box, about the size of a small cooler, covered in scratches and dents, as if it had been tossed and battered by the sea for years. But it was the markings on the box that truly froze him in place. The black surface was covered in a series of strange symbols, intricate, alien even. James had seen his fair share of rusted old crates and abandoned equipment, but these symbols were unlike anything he had ever seen before. They weren't letters, they weren't numbers. They looked like warnings or something more, but there was no mistaking the sense of foreboding that washed over him. He turned the box over, looking for some sort of label or explanation. There was nothing. Just the same cryptic markings, now more unsettling than ever. James knew better than to ignore his instincts, and right now, every fiber of his being screamed at him to leave this alone. He stood there, holding the box, caught between fear and fascination. The decision to open it further, to discover what was inside, suddenly felt like a dangerous one. His mind raced. Was it dangerous? Was it some kind of contraband? Drugs? Weapons? He had heard stories of things being smuggled in and out of the waters here, but this didn't feel like that. This felt different. He could feel his pulse quicken. There was a part of him that wanted to throw it overboard, forget he ever laid eyes on it. But there was another part of him, the fisherman's curiosity, that told him he had to know what was inside. He set the box down carefully, pulling his phone from his pocket. He could call the police. He could contact the Coast Guard. But deep down, he knew this wasn't something that would be easily explained. Something told him that if he called anyone now, this would turn into something bigger than he could handle. But maybe it already was. Before he could make up his mind, his phone rang. It was his wife, Laura. "James, you all right?" she asked, her voice calm, but there was an edge of concern. I don't know, Laura. I found something. Out here, I don't know what it is." The line went silent for a moment, and then Laura spoke again, her tone serious. "Are you safe? Where exactly are you?" James glanced around, noticing how alone he was, miles away from the nearest dock. The shore was barely a sliver of land in the distance. "I'm fine. Just a little shaken up. It's nothing really." But even as he said that, he knew it was far from nothing. Something in his gut told him this was just the beginning. "You need to be careful, James. Don't do anything foolish. Just stay put and wait for help. I'll call the Coast Guard. Tell them where you are." He hesitated, not wanting to involve anyone else just yet. "I'm not sure that's necessary. It's just a box. It's probably nothing." But his voice lacked the conviction it should have had. Laura didn't buy it. "James," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you're a fisherman. You know better than anyone when something's off. Trust your instincts. Don't take any chances." He took a deep breath, her words sinking in. "All right," he said, glancing down at the strange box. "I'll wait." But something was gnawing at him. He wasn't sure what it was, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this box, whatever it was, had chosen him. He had no idea why, but it felt like it was calling to him, like it was meant to be found, and perhaps meant to be opened by him. James closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing on him. Whatever was inside this box, it wasn't something that belonged in the ocean, and as much as he wanted to deny it, he knew he couldn't just leave it out there. He had to know what was inside. He had no choice. With that thought, he opened the box. James slowly lifted the lid, feeling his heart race faster with every second. Inside the box was a collection of small, seemingly innocuous items, neatly packed in dark velvet-lined compartments. But the moment he saw them, he realized they were anything but ordinary. The first item he pulled out was a small metal object, polished to a dull sheen. It looked like a piece of jewelry at first, perhaps a bracelet or a keychain. But as he turned it over in his hand, he realized it was too precise, too mechanical. It had intricate carvings that matched the symbols on the outside of the box, and a small switch on one side. James squinted at it, the realization creeping in that he had no idea what it could be. Was it a part of something larger, or something entirely foreign? He set it aside carefully, his hands trembling just a little. His gaze lingered on the other items inside. A faded map, rolled tightly and held together with a dark red ribbon. A few small vials, filled with what looked like liquid. The color was so strange, James couldn't quite place it. Was it ink? A chemical of some sort? He had no idea. His years on the water hadn't prepared him for this kind of thing. He reached for the map first, unrolling it gently, as if afraid it would crumble under his touch. The map was old, very old. It wasn't like any map he'd seen before. The edges were frayed and yellowed, the paper fragile and thin, as if it could disintegrate at the slightest touch. It depicted a coastline that wasn't anywhere near his own, the geography unfamiliar. There were no recognizable landmarks, just sharp, jagged lines and odd symbols that seemed to match the ones on the box and the other items inside. What caught James's eye was a small, circular drawing near the bottom of the map. A simple compass rose with a strange, unfamiliar symbol in the center of it. His brow furrowed. What kind of map was this? And why was it in a box floating in the middle of the ocean? The questions seemed to multiply, each one more urgent than the last. James turned the map over, looking for any clue that might explain its origins. Nothing. No writing, no date, no signature. Just more of those same bizarre symbols, scrawled at the edges like a hidden message. As his fingers brushed over the map, his gaze shifted back to the box. There was still one more item inside, a small circular disc, no larger than a coin. It was made of some kind of dark metallic material and covered in strange engravings. The symbols were unlike anything James had ever seen, even in his years of fishing the coast. His stomach churned as he looked at it. He could feel the weight of the mystery pressing down on him, a weight he wasn't sure he could carry alone. The disc felt warm in his hand, unnervingly so. He had the odd sensation that it was alive, as if it pulsed with energy. He turned it over, half expecting it to do something, anything, but it remained cold, still, silent. No matter how he looked at it, though, he couldn't shake the feeling that this object, this entire box, was part of something much bigger than a fisherman's routine discovery. As he set the disc aside, the radio crackled to life, interrupting the heavy silence that had settled around him. "James, this is Laura. Are you still there?" His fingers went stiff around the radio. It was the voice of his wife crackling through the static, her tone even more concerned now. "Yeah, I'm here," he said, his voice rough. I opened the box. I don't know what I've found, Laura." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she asked, "Is everything all right? Should I come out there?" "I'm not sure. I don't think I can handle this alone. I don't even know what I've found here. There's no way I'm going to figure this out by myself." Laura's voice softened. "James, I'm going to call the Coast Guard. We'll get you some help." "No," he interrupted, his tone sharp. "I don't think it's something the Coast Guard can help with. I think it's bigger than that. I'm telling you, this isn't normal." Laura's voice was quiet, but she didn't need to say much. He knew what she was thinking. James had always trusted his gut, and if there was one thing his instincts were telling him now, it was that this box had been waiting for him. It had been placed in those waters for a reason. "James, just stay calm. We'll figure this out. I'll be waiting for you when you come back. Don't do anything rash." "Yeah, okay," James muttered, staring at the items laid out in front of him. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of everything. Was this some kind of treasure? Some lost artifact from an ancient civilization? Or was it something much darker, more dangerous? His thoughts were interrupted by a faint noise, the sound of a boat's motor in the distance. He looked up, squinting through the haze of afternoon light. It was the Coast Guard. He could see the boat cutting through the water, the blue and white of the official vessel making it unmistakable. Relief washed over him, but at the same time a cold feeling gripped his chest. Was he doing the right thing by calling them? The box was already out in the open, and whatever was in it, whatever story it had to tell, had already started to unfold. The boat grew closer, and James began to gather the items back into the box, his hands shaking slightly as he packed everything carefully. His heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure what he was about to do, but he knew it was too late to turn back now. He had opened the box. The mystery had begun. As the Coast Guard boat pulled up alongside his own, two officers jumped aboard, their faces etched with concern. "James Riley?" one of them asked, his voice firm but friendly. "That's me," James replied, his voice low. "I think I've found something strange." The officer's eyes flickered to the open box, his expression unreadable. "What's this? You said you found this out here?" James nodded. "I didn't know what it was at first, but it doesn't feel like something that's supposed to be in the ocean. I don't know if it's dangerous, or if it's just, I don't know what to think anymore." The officer bent down, his eyes narrowing as he inspected the contents of the box. He picked up the map first, turning it over in his hands. His face remained calm, but his eyes flickered with interest. "This is odd," the officer said, his voice trailing off as he looked at the strange symbols on the map. James's gut twisted. The officer knew this was no ordinary find. "What do you think it is?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," the officer replied slowly, looking up from the map. "But we'll get this checked out. You did the right thing, calling us." But as they loaded the box onto their boat, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was only scratching the surface of something much bigger than he could understand. The questions swirled in his mind like a storm, each one darker than the last. What was the meaning behind the symbols? What did it all lead to? And who would have left it in the ocean for him to find? What do you think, viewers? Do you think James made the right decision by opening the box, or was it a dangerous mistake? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, where are you watching from? We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from across the globe. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part of this mysterious journey. There's a lot more to come, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. As the Coast Guard officers carefully loaded the box onto their boat, James stood on the edge of his vessel, staring at the water. A sense of unease clung to him, even though he knew he had done the right thing by involving the authorities. He watched as the Coast Guard officers exchanged quiet words, their faces serious as if they were already aware that this was no ordinary find. One of the officers, a woman in her late 30s with short cropped hair, approached James. She held the map in one hand, carefully studying it as if it were some ancient artifact. Her gaze was intense, almost like she had seen something in it that made her question everything. "We'll need to take this back to the station for a full analysis," she said, her voice measured. "But I can tell you one thing, James. This doesn't look like something that belongs in the ocean." James nodded but didn't respond. His mind was still reeling from the discovery, trying to piece together what he had found and what it all meant. The symbols on the box, the strange map, the mysterious vial-like containers. It was like he had opened a door to something that was never meant to be uncovered. "Do you mind if I keep this?" James asked, his voice almost a whisper as he pointed to the small disc still sitting on his boat. The officer hesitated, eyeing the disc with wariness. "That one especially. I don't think we can let you keep it. We'll need to take it with us for examination." James's heart sank. There was something about that disc, that strange warmth it exuded, that made him feel connected to it in a way he couldn't explain. He wasn't ready to let go of it. Not yet. "I understand," he said quietly, feeling a pang of loss as the officer reached for the disc. She placed it in a small plastic evidence bag, sealing it with a zip tie, then placed it in her kit. "I suppose you'll let me know what you find." The officer looked at him, her eyes softening for a moment. "We'll keep you in the loop, James, but don't get your hopes up. This kind of thing takes time. If what's in that box is really as unusual as it seems, it could take a while before we can tell you anything useful." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. James nodded slowly, his mind turning over the possibilities. What could be inside that box? What was the meaning behind the strange items? Why had they been left for him to find? "Thank you," James muttered, watching as the officers started their boat, the hum of the engine reverberating in his chest. The Coast Guard vessel sped off toward the horizon, leaving James alone with the eerily calm sea. It had been hours since he found the box, but time had become irrelevant. He sat on the edge of his boat, staring at the ripples in the water, unable to shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever was hidden behind the objects in that box, whatever secrets they held, was something far greater than he could ever have imagined. He couldn't explain it, but the weight of it settled deep in his bones, making the air feel colder than it should be. The sea, which had once felt like his domain, now felt like something alien, something vast and unknowable. The mysterious box had drawn him into a story he wasn't sure he was ready for. The symbols, the vials, the map, they didn't fit into any part of his life. Not his fishing, not his years of navigating these waters, not anything. Yet now they were a part of his reality, pulling him into something bigger than the simple life he had led. James checked his phone again, wondering if there were any updates from Laura. He hadn't told her about the Coast Guard's visit yet, but he had a sinking feeling she was going to want more details when she heard about the items in the box. He typed out a quick message, telling her he was fine but would need to talk to her when he got back. He didn't want to worry her, not yet, but he knew the truth was that something had happened, something that would change everything. He sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing in. Was he ready for whatever was coming next? Could he handle it? The small nagging voice in the back of his head told him that things were only going to get more complicated from here on out. After what felt like an eternity, the sky began to darken, the orange hues of sunset casting a soft glow over the water. James started his boat's engine, preparing to head back to shore. As he pulled away, he glanced over his shoulder one last time, seeing the Coast Guard boat become a small dot on the horizon. Even from this distance, he could feel the tug of the mystery pulling at him. The rest of the trip back to the harbor passed in a blur. His mind was still reeling, And it wasn't until he docked his boat and tied it securely to the pier that he finally snapped out of his stupor. The evening air was cool, the salty breeze a familiar comfort. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel like home. James walked slowly toward the parking lot, his boots crunching on the gravel. His truck was parked just a few yards away, and as he approached, his phone buzzed. Laura's name appeared on the screen. He picked up the call quickly. "Hey, Laura." "James, what's going on? You okay?" she asked, her voice anxious. "You're not back yet. What did they say? Is everything all right?" James hesitated for a moment, trying to put the jumbled thoughts in his mind into words. "It's a lot to explain, but I'm fine. They're taking the box for analysis. They'll keep me updated. I'll be home soon." "I don't like this, James," Laura said, her voice tight with worry. "I've been thinking about it all afternoon and it just doesn't make sense."
Why would something like that end up in the ocean? And why would it be where you found it? There's something more going on, isn't there? James stopped walking for a moment, glancing around the empty harbor. It felt as though the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "I don't know, Laura," he admitted quietly, "but I think we're about to find out." What do you think, viewers? What could the strange box really be, and who would leave it in the ocean for James to find? And why? Could it be a message, or something far more sinister? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from? Let us know. Maybe there's more to this mystery than we realize. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you don't miss the next part of the story. Trust me, it's going to get even more intense from here. The night fell slowly over Myrtle Beach as James sat in his truck, his fingers gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. His thoughts raced, spinning around the strange box, the unfamiliar symbols, and the feeling that he had stumbled into something far bigger than he could comprehend. He tried to push the thoughts aside, but they clung to him like the damp chill in the air. He pulled into his driveway and turned off the engine, the familiar sight of his home offering little comfort. Laura had already called twice since their conversation. He knew she was worried, but he wasn't ready to share everything with her yet. There was too much uncertainty, too many questions, and too few answers. As he stepped out of the truck, his mind drifted back to the disc. He couldn't get it out of his head. The warmth it gave off, the strange markings, the way it seemed almost alive. He wondered if the Coast Guard would even be able to make sense of it, or if, like him, they'd just be left with more questions than answers. He entered the house, and Laura was already waiting for him in the living room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The look on her face made it clear she wasn't going to let this go. "James," she began, her voice softer than it had been on the phone. "Tell me everything. What's going on? What's in that box? You look like you've seen a ghost." James took a deep breath. His body felt heavy, as if the weight of the day had finally caught up with him. He sank into the couch, rubbing his temples as if the pressure in his skull might ease. "I don't know, Laura. I really don't know." She sat down beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You're scaring me, James. You don't sound like yourself. This whole thing, it's not just some lost cargo, is it?" "No, it's not," James replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've never seen anything like it. There's something off about it, Laura. I felt it the moment I touched that bag. There was something wrong." She looked at him intently, her eyes filled with concern. "What do you mean wrong? James, please. What's inside?" "I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. There were these symbols on the box, on the items inside. I don't think anyone's ever seen anything like it before." Laura's eyebrows furrowed. "Symbols? Are you sure? Could it be a part of some kind of treasure or something from a shipwreck?" James shook his head. "It doesn't feel like that. This isn't like any shipwreck stuff I've ever come across. These symbols, they looked ancient, like they didn't belong in this world." "I don't even think they're from this place. They were alien, Laura. And then there was this disc, this small metal disc. I can't explain it, but it felt different, alive, almost." Laura was silent for a moment, processing his words. "And the Coast Guard? What did they say?" "They're taking the items back for analysis. They were just as confused as I was. But I think they know this is bigger than it looks. They're going to investigate, but..." James trailed off, his words hanging in the air, unfinished. He could feel the weight of his own doubt, as if he had opened Pandora's box. The unknown was stretching out in front of him, and there was no telling where it would lead. Laura studied him for a moment longer before speaking again. "James, I know you've been through a lot today, but if something's going on, something bigger than just a lost crate, I think you need to be careful. The last thing I want is for you to get caught up in something dangerous." He turned to face her, meeting her eyes. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to reassure her, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was on the horizon. "I know, Laura. I feel the same way, but I can't shake the feeling that this is only the beginning. There's something about this, about those items, that doesn't sit right with me. I can't just forget about it. I have to know what it is." Laura didn't say anything at first, but after a moment she reached out and touched his hand. "Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? Don't go looking for trouble." James squeezed her hand, grateful for her support, even though he knew that, deep down, trouble had already found him. It wasn't something he had to search for. It had come to him, and now there was no going back. "Promise," he said. Though he knew his gut was telling him something different, there was no turning back now. The next few days passed slowly, the usual rhythm of James's life disrupted by the mystery that lingered in the back of his mind. He went about his daily routine, checked in with the Coast Guard, but there were no updates. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were keeping something from him, that the mystery of the box was somehow connected to something much darker. It wasn't until the following Friday that he got a call. It was from one of the officers from the Coast Guard, the woman who had taken the disc. "Mr. Riley?" she asked, her voice grave. "We need to talk." James's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" "We've reviewed the items you found. The box, the map, the disc, and everything else inside. We've run into something we didn't expect." A cold chill ran down his spine. "What do you mean?" "We don't know how to explain it. The symbols on the map, they're not anything we've ever seen before. They don't match any known language or ancient script. The disc, it's not just some old relic or part of a wreck. We've had it analyzed and we can't find anything on Earth that matches it." James's stomach tightened. "What are you saying? What are you telling me? There's more to this than we realized. We're starting to think that this isn't just some lost artifact. It might be part of something bigger, something we don't understand yet. We need you to come down here and help us piece this together. You might be the key to understanding what's really going on." James's mind raced. The words echoed in his head, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. "I'll be there. I'll be right there." He hung up the phone, his breath shallow. It was happening. Whatever this was, whatever the box and its contents were, they were starting to unravel, and James had no idea where it would lead. What do you think, viewers? What could the Coast Guard have found that James hasn't been told? Could the items he discovered be part of something much bigger than anyone realizes? What's really behind those strange symbols and the mysterious disc? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next part of this eerie mystery. Who knows what James will uncover next? Make sure you're ready for whatever comes next. James arrived at the Coast Guard station just after dusk. The air was thick with tension, and he could sense that something significant had already transpired. As he stepped off his truck and walked towards the main building, his mind raced with questions. What had they found? What was it about those items that had shaken the professionals at the station? The officer from earlier, the woman with the short cropped hair, was waiting for him at the entrance. Her expression was serious, and there was something guarded in her eyes. "Mr. Riley," she greeted him, but there was no warmth in her tone, only the cold sense of urgency. "We need to talk. We've got something that you need to see." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and led him into the station. The familiar hum of machinery and voices seemed oddly distant, drowned out by the pounding in his chest. James had a sense that whatever was coming next would change everything. They reached a back room where a table was laid out with the items he had discovered. The box was there, along with the strange map, the small vials, and the disc. But something was different. The officers had pulled apart the box, and it was now completely open. A strange, faintly glowing symbol was etched into the bottom of the box, one James had missed before, hidden in the shadows. It seemed to pulsate, like it was calling to him. He couldn't help but lean closer. "What's this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "We've been running tests on everything," the officer said, her voice low. "That symbol you missed, it's a form of energy, not like anything we've encountered before. It's not just a map, it's a key. The disc, the vials, they're all part of something much more complex." "Energy?" James echoed, his voice faltering. "What do you mean, energy?" You're telling me it's some kind of power? We're still figuring it out, she said, clearly frustrated. But this is where it gets strange. That disc? It's not just some artifact. We've run electromagnetic tests on it. The energy it's emitting is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's not from this planet, Riley. It's not even from this century. It's almost as if it's from another time. James stood frozen, processing what she was saying. Another time? The officer nodded. We believe this is some sort of gateway, a way of opening access to something or somewhere else. We don't know if it's real or if it's just an ancient legend, but those symbols, they match a long-forgotten myth, one that speaks of travelers from the stars, beings who left a trace of their presence here on Earth. James shook his head. Wait, are you saying this is alien? We don't know, she said, but we've sent samples to various labs around the world. They've confirmed that the metals are not from Earth. The energy readings are unlike anything we can measure. This isn't just a treasure, Riley. This is something much, much bigger. And you found it. James felt the blood drain from his face. He had stumbled into something no one was prepared for. And as much as he wanted to understand it all, part of him wished he had never opened that bag, never touched that box. But the other part of him, the part of him that had always followed the pull of the sea and the unknown, felt an undeniable curiosity stirring. So what happens now? He asked quietly. The officer exchanged a look with her colleague, then turned back to James. We're investigating, but we're going to need your help. This isn't just something we can handle alone. We've already seen signs of people trying to track down these artifacts, and we think there are others like it, hidden in different places. We don't know who's after them, but we do know this. They're dangerous. Dangerous, James repeated. Why? Because if these things fall into the wrong hands, the officer said, her voice low, it could change everything. The power they hold isn't just knowledge, it's control. We don't know who wants it, but we're already getting indications that someone is coming for these artifacts, and they'll do anything to get their hands on them. James felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What does this mean for me? What am I supposed to do? We'll need you to help us. You're the one who found it. You're the one who's closest to this. We'll need your knowledge of the area, your familiarity with the coast, but you also need to be prepared. If people are after these things, they won't stop until they get them. James thought about his family, his home, Laura. He had a decision to make, one that could change everything. He could walk away from this, pretend it never happened. But he knew deep down that this wasn't a story that would let him go. The mystery had already set its hooks in him, and there was no escaping it. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded. I'll help, but I want to know everything. I need to understand what we're dealing with here. The officer nodded. We'll tell you everything we know, but know this. You've opened something that cannot be closed. The truth is out there now, and it's only a matter of time before the rest of the world knows. The weight of the officer's words sank in. James had just become part of something far greater than he could have ever imagined, and there was no turning back now.